I want to say that Omar and Javier have been working very hard and working very efficiently in helping me getting all these computer. Feels good finally to have people who are not afraid of the computer. And I'm not afraid, you know, but I'm not afraid in a stupid way because, you know, but they're not afraid in an educated way, so they can solve problems, you know. I'm not afraid in a stupid way. I just keep doing things and then keep creating mistakes, you know. So I'm not very useful that way, you know, even though I'm not afraid of computers. But they're not afraid, and, you know, they're educated in computers, and so they can solve so many problems and get things, you know. The other side of that is it's not just having skill. Some people have skill, but don't have devotion, you know. I'm not talking about devotion to me. And in case if they have that, don't waste it on me. You know, devotion to the teachings, you know, to recognizing how doing this, we can help others. Otherwise, it seems so difficult to help others, you know. But however we can help others access the Dharma in a helpful way, in a way that will support their practice. Doing that, you know, is how we're able to benefit others. So also I wanted, now that I am talking about this, I want to thank particularly Omar and Javier. Then of course, all of you who have done whatever you have done to support the Dharma, whether in this context or in the context of your local center. My heartfelt thanks as well. But and then, you know, to continue this, then speaking selfishly, I really need and I appreciate people who not only have skills, but have strong, stable devotion to the bigger view of what we are doing, you know. That way, you know, when we keep the bigger view, then all the little things that come up, you know, for sure there are lots of annoying things you have to put up with, you know, when you're working with me. And it's easy to kind of get distracted by that and say, oh, I don't want to help anymore. And that's what I mean by devotion to me, you know. Devotion to me, easily that will go away. Because I cannot live up to your expectations. I cannot even live up to my expectations, you know. And to expect people to live up to your expectations, that's just impossible, you know. More likely you'll be Buddha first, you know, than me living up to your expectations. So if you help, you know, I hope and that we understand. We are all trying our best, but when you help, you know, think in terms of like in appreciation and devotion to the Dharma. Yeah? Then particularly the Dharma as we have received it. And from there, maybe there is some, you know, some related to me, which is every Lama, every teacher have their particular way of kind of transmitting the Dharma. So in a way, also you say 84,000 Dharmas also have something to do with each teacher, each Lama have their particular way. So that, of course, I recognize and I, you know, appreciate that you stick around because maybe you find that the way that I am presenting this, you know, makes a lot of sense to you. And in that way, yes, of course, I recognize that. I also don't want you to think that I don't care, that you have connected with me. Of course I care, but the bigger point of, but don't put your eggs, in this basket, so to say. Always put it in the bigger basket. That's why we say we dedicate merit. One of the meanings of dedicating merit is if we put it in the basket that is limited, that is self, easily it will be damaged. If we put it in the bigger basket of I do this and dedicate this for the enlightenment and freedom from suffering of all beings. So we dedicate, right? That dedication, that merit can never be destroyed. But if you keep it in the small basket, even if, yes, it's meaningful, keep it in the small basket, and then in this context, the basket is you and me, our Dharma relationship. That, unreliable, can be damaged, due to your karma, due to my karma, due to your karma clashing with my karma, then all the eggs broken, But if you put in the ocean of the Buddhist merits, then they say, no damage. But nonetheless, as I said, I appreciate, I recognize that you have so many options, you could be listening to so many other teachings elsewhere, but that we have connected. So maybe, the way I share with you these teachings, the way this transmission is happening, is something that makes sense for you, at least right now. Maybe you will grow out of this and go to, more helpful in your process, then that's fine, But on your way out, say something to me, don't just disappear. That also happens. I don't know what that's all about, It's very strange. Anyway, so Gampopa, he has unique contributions to what we now understand as Gagyu. As I said, the three founding fathers, although they're from 3 generations, but you can say that they are the 3 founding fathers. It's not like 3 of them live in the same, like same generation, but 3 generations. The 3 founding fathers of Gagyu is Marpa, Milarepa, and Gampopa. Marpa, Milarepa, and Gampopa, the 3 founding fathers. And they really, if you take snapshots, as I said, of each of their lifetime and what they brought, that eventually coalesce, come together and recognize as Kagyupa, they each have different styles, a different emphasis, a different lifestyle, different capacities. But one word or one idea that Milarepa expressed is that he says, in this lineage, in this transmission, each succeeding generation should be greater than the generation before. It's a very optimistic view of the future. It seems like religion tends to be very conservative, in the sense of like, the good days are only in the past, Everything is just, will get worse and worse and worse and worse into the future. Yeah. If it's anything great, it's happened in the past. In the future, it's all downhill until somehow the guy who started it in the past returns again. Yeah? So whether it's second coming of Jesus, or Maitreya, or the Mahdi in the Muslim tradition, seems that most religions seem to think things will get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Milarepa expressed something very optimistic. He said, if this transmission goes right, if this lineage actually goes the way it should go, then every generation will be greater than the generation before. So in that sense, now don't misunderstand. This is not talking about, that oh, Gampopa is greater than Mila, Mila is greater than Marpa. Insofar as Dharmakaya is concerned, they are absolutely identical. What Milarepa is talking about is twofold. One is each succeeding generation should be greater than the one before because hopefully it has benefited from the good that the previous generation has manifested. And also, I would emphasize, I think most Tibetans don't emphasize this, and also learn from the mistakes that the previous generation created. And so then, in that sense, each generation should be greater than the generation before. Then each generation is greater than the generation before. Look at it from a more transcendent point of view. What Milarepa is actually saying is, again, not that, Gampopa is greater than Milarepa, Milarepa is greater than Marpa, insofar as their level of Dharmakaya realization, no different, yeah. But in terms of how the impact that they're going to have on the relative level, then Gampopa's impact was greater than Milarepa, Milarepa's impact was greater than Marpa. In that sense, the impact. And that impact, again, has to do with interdependence between teacher and those who are to be taught. Teacher by him or herself cannot become great. Jikten Sumgon said, right? Remember that part where we talked about, he said, if you want to know, if this or that Lama is great or not, look at his disciples. Look at his disciples. If his disciples all are doing well, achieving realization, dedicating their time and practice, then we can say, oh, that is a good teacher. So in that way, it's actually the next generation, it's actually the students that are the true sign of whether the teacher was a good teacher or not, whether the teacher is a great teacher or not. Yeah. So in that sense, right, it's what Milarepa means, each generation should be greater than the generation before. So anyway, among these three founding fathers, it was really Gampopa that with him bringing primarily two streams, sometimes what we translate as lineage can also mean stream, gyupa. Gampopa brought two streams together and blended that into one big stream that we now call Kagyu. In fact, it's called Dakpo Kagyu. Dakpo is where Gampopa came from. Sometimes he's called Dakpo Rinpoche in a more respectful way. We in the West say Gampopa, Gampopa, Gampopa. Tibetans don't necessarily call people by their, name. Yeah? So they say Dakpo Rinpoche or Dakpo Larje. That means the like something like the great physician from Dakpo, because Gampopa, before he became a monk, he was a famous doctor. So now, of course, he's also a doctor, as in he's the great doctor of the mind that will heal you from the suffering of samsara. Right? Sometimes it's called Dakpo Larje or Dakpo Rinpoche. So, in fact, Kagyu, sometimes it's called Dakpo Kagyu. And Dakpo Kagyu is the Kagyu that Drigong is part of the family of Dakpo Kagyu. Karma Kagyu is part of the family of Dakpo Kagyu. Drukpa Kagyu is part of the family of Dakpo Kagyu. So they're all spiritual descendants specifically of Gampopa. There were other spiritual descendants of Milarepa that were like nephews, spiritual nephews of Gampopa. But Karma Kagyu, Drukpa Kagyu, Drigung Kagyu, Talong Kagyu, these are all descended from Gampopa's spiritual heirs. Yeah. And so in particular, it comes through from Gampopa. With one of my other classes yesterday, in one of my other classes, we've been doing, this is ongoing with the group in Little Rock, Arkansas. We've been actually reading, or they have, I join them whenever I can. So that commitment is easier. No one is expecting me to turn up on any given Sunday. If I can, I join them. So they have been reading the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. Yeah. One of the 3 books, remember I said, if I'm going to be shipwrecked, I will be sure. I cannot bring the iPad because shipwreck, you cannot recharge your iPad. So in the end, if I get on any ship, in case it's going to wreck, I need 3 books, 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. Yeah. And quite literally, this is always here. The Bodhicavatara of Shantideva and Gongchik, So these 3. Anyway, we've been reading Milarepa songs. And I pointed out, I said that when you read songs of Milarepa and you see whenever Milarepa talks about mahamudra, he always, almost always, he will also mention Chandali or Tumbo, or 6 yogas of Naropa things. Basically because Milarepa taught mahamudra exclusively using Vajrayana methods. Vajrayana methods, deity yoga, yes, as generation stage, but completion stage is the yogic practices that Milarepa was famous for, which is these manipulating of energy within the body, causing the energy to dissolve into the central channel, all those, And those are squarely in the Vajrayana tradition, taught in the Tantras, transmitted by the Mahasiddhas like Tilopa, Naropa, and of course Marpa himself. Then Marpa taught Milarepa. Then Milarepa really is said, So quickly, Marpa's contribution is more in the realm of having brought all these teachings and practices and transmissions back from India to Tibet and translated them into Tibetan. And Marpa himself was extremely educated in tantric theory and tantric systems. And so there are 7 major tantric systems that Marpa was an expert in. Of the 7, especially Hevajra. Hevajra in India was also a major kind of Vajrayana system. So Marpa himself was a great authority on Hevajra and himself practiced Hevajra. But his teacher Naropa said, you will have a student called Milarepa, or not Milarepa, another name, but you have a student by this name. It turns out it's Milarepa. When he turns up, you give him Chakasamvara. Even though your main practice is Hevajra, you give him Chakasamvara because his connections is with Chakasamvara. And he will benefit a lot of beings by practicing that. So Marpa gave Milarepa that, but Milarepa did not spend a lot of time studying tantric theory. Yeah, instead, his focus was more on retreat and experience, direct experience. So that gave Milarepa the skill to instruct disciples when they turn up randomly, because Milarepa never set a course of study, which Marpa did to train Marpa's own students. Among them is Milarepa. So Marpa's like tantric study course, you could say Milarepa never attended or didn't do the whole course. He just got the essential instructions and then he went and meditated. Marpa's like real source, real knowledge and everything was completely given to another disciple called Lama Ngo Choku Dorje. Then Ngo Choku Dorje absorbed all of that and transmitted it to his sons, and his sons to their sons, and their sons for like, I think, 8 or 12 generations. So that's Marpa, okay? Milarepa took the basic instructions and practices, and he went and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And he did not spend a lot of time with Marpa. He came to Marpa later in Marpa's life. So he practiced. Then in the songs of Milarepa, you see how he meets a cowherd, he meets a thief, a robber. He can directly instruct them. In fact, when he instructs them, you can see how he doesn't start with, first there's the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, and then there is karma, and then there's this, and then there's refuge. Yeah. He often, if you look carefully at the songs of Milarepa, immediately he will get them to probe their own, what is mind? Immediately he will start there. In a way, that's his hook. So he gives some hints about mahamudra already. But the songs also indicate, although the songs don't explain, because these are esoteric Vajrayana instructions. It will only say, in between the songs, there are these stories, right? They will say, and then Milarepa gave him instructions on how to practice Tummo. That is never discussed in the book, because those are to be learned directly from a teacher. But when it comes to practicing Mahamudra, Milarepa always gave his disciples instructions based on the yogas, the Naropa yogas, and the deity practice. Again, also deity practice, not systematically presented in the songs of Milarepa. In that way, both Milarepa and Marpa's emphasis on Mahamudra, as in Mahamudra, always presented in the context of Vajrayana. Gampopa got that, but Gampopa also blends this with his training that he received from Kadampa, from Atisha's lineage. Gampopa was an Kadampa monk. When he came to Milarepa, he never gave up, his Kadampa training. He didn't come to Milarepa because he thought the Kadampa things were wrong. No. It's just that he understood that his experience and his realization is still limited. And he heard of the reputation of Milarepa, and he went to seek Milarepa's help. And through Milarepa giving him instructions, which I'm very sure it's Mahamudra, but in the context of Vajrayana, specifically the yogas of Naropa, then it said that Gampopa fully dispelled all his confusions and afflictive emotions, achieved realization of mahamudra. But what's interesting is then with Gampopa, he began to teach mahamudra to his students when he started to have students, sometimes using the same style as the way Milarepa taught him, but sometimes not using very much Vajrayana at all. In fact, not seemingly insisting that you have to do Vajrayana, meaning the yogas of Naropa. It is really with Gampopa that you see the teaching of Mahamudra using Sutrayana vocabulary, using Sutrayana methods. Then Shamatha Vipassana, quotations from the sutras rather than the tantras. So if you look at Gampopa's collection of teachings, you will come across references to Sutrayana Mahamudra and Vajrayana or secret mantra Mahamudra. And you also come across references to essence Mahamudra. So it seems like what Gampopa started to teach is that there is essence Mahamudra, that if that is taught effectively, then it can be taught via Sutrayana or via secret mantrayana. That either way is fine. But he says it depends on the skill of the teacher and the devotion of the student. You could say that in some ways he's almost seemed to be suggesting if you can do the very disciplined and difficult training of Vajrayana yogas, the 6 yogas, which is very difficult, need to be very disciplined and also a very flexible body. That's why they start at 16, he said, if you can do that, and so among his students, those he recognized could do that, he taught them Mahamudra in that way because it is said to be suitable to them. But then also you see a lot in Gampopa. And there is a Kamakagyu Rinpoche that wrote his dissertation at Harvard University, looking at Gampopa and Gampopa's life and his teaching style. This dissertation really showed that you see an evolution in Gampopa so that as he got older, he started to teach more and more Mahamudra without emphasizing the kind of the method or the approach that needs a lot of control. More and more, he was just leading disciples to Mahamudra using this kind of emphasizing devotion. It's almost like devotion becomes like a substitute, maybe that word is too strong because it's never completely, replaced, but you can see more and more an emphasis on devotion. And in that way, Jikten Sumgon's emphasis on devotion in some ways, you can see that it comes from Gampopa's having transformed the way that mahamudra could be taught and practiced. When I mentioned this in this class yesterday, somebody said, so how was that received by other people? Like this Gampopa's, because in a way, right? This is not how Milarepa taught. This is not how Marpa taught. And I said, yeah, good question. Because actually, we get hints here and there in Milarepa's biography that there were these learned ones, they were called geshes, but they're not like Gelugpa geshes. There are no Gelugpa yet. This is a few hundred years before even the start of Gelugpa. And in Milarepa's time, geshes only mean like, educated, scholarly monks. So you get hints that these geshes were coming to debate him. Yeah. But the real evidence of like objections to Gampopa's way of teaching Mahamudra, surprise, surprise, it's found in the writings of who? Whose writings?
Sakya Pandita.
Sakya Pandita. Sakya Pandita is a few generations after Gampopa. Sakya Pandita was younger contemporary of Jikten Sumgon, but never met Jikten Sumgon himself, but met Sherabjungne. Yeah. Sakya Pandita took exception to Gampopa. He said, he used very strong words. He said, sort of like he said, Gampopa perverted Milarepa's teachings and Marpa. So Sakya Pandita, would praise Milarepa and Marpa and said, they taught Mahamudra the right way, which is Mahamudra can only be taught and only be experienced and practiced strictly in the Vajrayana way. But this other thing that Gampopa is talking about is a betrayal of the tradition. He said, you have betrayed your teacher and your teacher's teacher. Of course, that's almost 100 years later, Milarepa wasn't around to say, no, Gampopa wasn't around to say, no. So then Gampopa's spiritual descendants have to respond to Sakya Pandita and say, no, you got this wrong. You don't understand, and then all those things, yeah. So my point is Gampopa's influence is very prominent, very strong. One of the things to point out also, particularly, Sakya Pandita accused Gampopa as repackaging the Chinese heresy. It said that, there were these sorts of teachings that the Chinese monks were teaching after Pemasambhava left Tibet. And the king already had a debate where Kamalashila debated the Chinese monks and proved the Chinese monks wrong and banished these teachings from Tibet. And now, this Gampopa guy, he is recycling this Chinese wrong teachings. So as a result, like all the Kagyupas are very sensitive on this issue, that Gampopa's teachings, might have been a Chinese product. Back then, during that time, there's no animosity towards the Chinese that today there is, for good reasons, now political issue. Yeah. Back then, to say it's Chinese is not, it doesn't have that layer of politics, because, China didn't go to Tibet. If anything, the Mongols were the ones who went to Tibet always to fight and to destroy things. The Chinese, for the most part, did not go to Tibet until the cultural, the takeover of Tibet in the modern period. So back then, to accuse someone of like the Chinese, oh, you're Chinese, is actually to talk about this heresy. So Kagyupas, particularly, they're kind of sensitive about that issue. But I can report, like His Holiness the Gongchik AUG, he doesn't care. In fact, in his Mahamudra teachings, I'm editing one of his Mahamudra teachings. He would make references to Bodhidharma, to Zen, and he said, "Oh, in Zen, it's this way," and it's similar to what we're talking about here. He said, "It's similar." Of course, historically, all the Kagyupas, when they write about this, they're like, "No, no, 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 we are not that like them." So for them, historical Kagyupas, in part because historical Kagyupas, they don't really know what Zen people believe or not, because there's not much interaction. They only remember this supposed debate that happened a long time ago. Yes, so they have no possibility of clarifying. Actually, Zen people, or Chan people, they don't believe the things that we say they believe, So the Kagyu, figures historically, in order to defend Gampopa, they also, in a way, criticize Zen and say, "Oh, Zen is bad this way, this way, this way, that way," But of course, what they write about Zen, Zen people will look and say, "Wait, we don't believe this. What are you talking about?" So I would say, caricature of Zen in Tibet, in part due to Sakya Pandita reminding people, hey, our Tibetan kings already kicked these people out. Now, again, also, we know from modern research that was not the case. The Chinese monks were never really kicked out of Tibet, and the supposed debate at Samye never really happened. Instead, people were writing letters, arguing their positions, and the letters were seemingly sent to the Tibetan king. Yeah. So Gampopa himself, now, in case you start to think, oh, Gampopa must have learned from the Chinese. No. Because there is, in fact, in Atisha's teachings, there is clearly a way of teaching Mahamudra without explicitly involving Vajrayana methods, Vajrayana training. Then beyond Atisha, you go back to India, there is clearly also that tradition among the Mahasiddhas, like Maitripa especially. But even in Tilopa, even Tilopa's Ganga Mahamudra, very famous text, he teaches basically essence Mahamudra, although that vocabulary is not there, but he teaches basically what now would be identified as essence Mahamudra, directly pointing out, the nature of mind. In the same way that actually Milarepa also did that. Like I said, a shepherd would come and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then he would immediately kind of say, "Well, this is what I'm doing. I'm meditating." The shepherd might say, "What's meditating?" He said, "Well, look at your mind and come back tomorrow and tell me what you saw." So this kind of like pointing out, this kind of introduction, right? Now, of course, with Milarepa, as I said, it seems like when someone becomes really serious now and say, "Train me," he would train them in the yogas, because he saw that as a very powerful way to cut through all the confusions, to cut through all the distractions. But interestingly, in Tilopa's Ganga Mahamudra, this is fresh in my mind because I'm editing this book. Tilopa would basically give the same kind of instructions using space as the analogy. And then at the end, this has like 28, 29 verses. Around verse 25, 26, he says, and for those who cannot directly practice this, then there are the various methods of the yogas of controlling energy, of harnessing energy. Then he's almost like an afterthought. He gives one kind of brief reference to one verse on the yogas. And he said, then you can use those methods to help you. So here you see evidence that Tilopa, without directly saying it, but clearly implied there are other ways to realizing and practicing Mahamudra that doesn't involve these forceful yogas. And so what Gampopa did is not some new creation on his end, but basically, finally, the time is right. The conditions are right for him to more directly also teach Mahamudra and provide Mahamudra training for those disciples who do not need or not suitable to practice Vajrayana Mahamudra. Then he gave instructions on Shamatha Vipassana. So this is like Gampopa's, one of Gampopa's real influence. And then particularly also from the Kadampa side, the great emphasis on Lojong, training the mind, meaning training in the two bodhicittas. So training in the two bodhicittas and a more systematic way of training in the two bodhicittas. So Gampopa's emphasis on Lamrim, which is something that Atisha emphasized, stages of the path, as well as training the mind. So that side. Of course, you see that in Milarepa and in Marpa, but not so center staged. Gampopa did that. And so now you can see how Jikten Sumgon clearly is a spiritual descendant of particularly Gampopa. So much of Jikten Sumgon, right, is bodhicitta in the two aspects and understanding nature of mind, recognizing nature of mind, habituating nature of mind. In the system of the fivefold Mahamudra, right? Bodhicitta, first one, and there specifically, it's relative bodhicitta. Yeah. Then idam, then guru devotion, then natural state Mahamudra, actual Mahamudra, and dedication. So in this system, some degree of secret mantra of Vajrayana is blended together in this fivefold, particularly like idam. But no strong emphasis on the forceful yogas, the yogas of Naropa. No, in this fivefold, it's not there. And this fivefold is said to be a complete way of practicing. So the fivefold Mahamudra is not exclusively Sutra Mahamudra, but also not like exclusively Secret Mantra Mahamudra. You could say Sutra Mahamudra is there, Secret Mantra Mahamudra is there, Essence Mahamudra is there, combined into the system of fivefold. And Gongchik is the system of fivefold Mahamudra. So any questions or comments, or observations? Anything?
I have a question about Atisha.
Mm-hmm.
He's not considered one of the founders, but he's just somewhat below that in importance? Or he's not really?
Yeah, he's not explicitly mentioned in these lineage prayers, but in a lot of the kind of accounts of the lineage, he is mentioned. Yeah, just like, for example, Maitripa was very important in Marpa's Mahamudra training. Marpa, when he went to India. But his name is not explicitly mentioned in these lineage prayers. Instead, Naropa. Because every generation, the way these lineage prayers and lineage is constructed, every generation, one person, one person, one person, one person. So Naropa is emphasized and Maitripa is not. But if you look carefully, Maitripa was a major influence because Naropa basically, as I mentioned in the Golden Lineage series, you should listen to that series. Naropa was sort of like, you could say, Marpa's director of studies. He directed Marpa's training and sent Marpa to, according to one account, he sent Marpa to 108 different teachers for the 10-15 years that Marpa spent in India. And Maitripa was the main person responsible for Marpa's Mahamudra, essence Mahamudra teachings and training. Although that vocabulary wasn't used in Marpa's own writings. So in the same way, even though Atisha was influential in Gampopa's training, but Gampopa is 2 generations removed from Atisha. Yeah, so Atisha already passed, by the time Gampopa became a monk. So no direct, but nonetheless, Gampopa's basic grounding is in Kadampa. So again, like in many of Gampopa's writings, collected works, he would sign his works as by, his name Sonam Rinchen, a lowly monk in the Kadampa lineage. He would sign his name like that. Partly also because I think Kadampa was more recognized as a cohesive, system, right, in Gampopa's own time. Whereas Milarepa was this wandering ascetic. So if he signed, a student of Milarepa, people are like, who? You have to remember, like during that time, it's like, Mila who? Maybe it's just too troublesome. Mila who? But if you say Kadampa, oh yeah, right, So Gampopa, in many ways, he is the one that pulled everything together to give what we now call Kagyupa its distinguishing characteristics, particularly his way of teaching Mahamudra, which was very controversial. So where are we? Mahamudra and disciplined conduct. Okay. So any questions for the notes that I said you should read? Sometimes they are very, very detailed. And at this point, especially if you're just getting used to this kind of writing, if it gets too tight, too dense, then step back. Don't try to push too much. Any questions on the notes for 613? Well, good, I suppose. 600, page 600, there's a quote from Nono Rinpoche. And Nono Rinpoche is Nono indicates actually that he was from Ladakh. So this is a great master from Ladakh in more recent times. I think he lived within the last maybe last 100 years, if I'm not mistaken, if I did not misremember, Nono Rinpoche. But Nono Rinpoche, Sobish, quotes his one section of his commentary on the Fivefold Path. And I think this is, let us quickly look at this, because this vital point of how cause and effect and Mahamudra is one entity. You cannot separate these two. This is important. Because especially, if you pick up a book, there's one book that's been translated called the 84 Mahasiddhas, right? If you read those accounts, you will come across in those biographies a lot of very outrageous behavior, right? Behavior that seemingly, right, suggests that these Mahasiddhas don't need to pay attention to cause and effect anymore. So definitely, there is material for you to interpret it that way, for sure. But in this tradition, especially Kyopa Jikten Sumgon, he takes great effort to show how, no, the actions of the Mahasiddhas, you don't understand what's actually going on. And then you misunderstand and think, that they are beyond cause and effect. In some ways, he says, even Buddha is not beyond cause and effect. Yeah, even Buddha is not beyond cause and effect. So how much more any of these Mahasiddhas can be beyond cause and effect? It's an impossibility, basically. Yeah. So page 600. In particular, all practices of the beings of highest faculties must be performed with joint method and discriminative wisdom. That means skillful means and wisdom, prajna, upaya and prajna. Yeah. Concerning the manner of practicing this, the primordial original state of all phenomena, comprising everything that can possibly exist in samsara and nirvana, namely true reality. These are all synonyms. True reality, the essence of reality, or the fundamental nature, she, this she, the she that we talk about at the chapter 1, verse 1, she bab, right? She, essence, is beyond the sphere of what is expressible as existence, non-existence, arising, cessation, going, coming. So on the essence level, right? On the level of fundamental nature, basically, you can say emptiness. Furthermore, while that fundamental nature itself, which is free from all extremes of the proliferations of the mind that grasp characteristics, is the emptiness that is not manifest as anything whatsoever. Its self-radiant, clear, and unhindered, and self-luminous playful expression exists as the self-luminous, self-appearing manifestation of the empty, that is able to appear and arise as any form or characteristic whatsoever, like water itself moves in the form of waves. Right? This would be the bab, the way it plays out. Again, referencing chapter 1, verse 1. She bab. She is essence, bab is the way it plays out. Through the power of this vital point, it is impossible that cause and effect will fail, even in subtle ways. Therefore, emptiness arises as cause and effect, and this dependent origination, which is such that cause and effect do not deviate from emptiness, is taught to be true reality, the fundamental nature. So sometimes just the word fundamental nature can also include bab, the way it plays out, because it's basically the same thing, right? It's just in order for us to see more clearly, then we use sometimes two different words. She, fundamental nature, essence, and bab, the way it comes down, the way it plays out. But the way it plays out according to its fundamental nature. And the way the fundamental nature is that it plays out according to cause and effect without errors. So now jump to 617, because this, in a way, I'm not sure why it is 17 and not 14. Because this also involves the relationship between realizing mahamudra and cause and effect. Right? And here is emptiness. So it says, if one has realized emptiness, emptiness emerges as cause and result. And so this is in response to people claim that because cause and result are exhausted after one realizes emptiness, they are completely done with. They are completely done with it. And they, as in, those who have realized emptiness, they're completely done with cause and effect. Now, this is a very common way, especially Mahayana people and Vajrayana people. In Theravada, you don't see people talking like this. And they're more careful, I think, in my opinion. They're more careful. And they will not say, oh, they're beyond karma, because that's a dangerous statement to make, On this end of confusion, it's our negative karma that creates suffering. What's the point of talking about beyond negative karma? It just turns into a fantasy. Oh, I'm going to be beyond karma. So here the commentary from Chodra. If one has realized emptiness, one realizes the fundamental nature of all phenomena, the shibab. Now here, Sobish translates shibab as just fundamental nature. But as we saw, shibab can be further divided. Shi as in essence, bab, the way it plays out, okay? So if one realizes emptiness, one realizes, so if we were to translate this more literally, it will be, if one realized emptiness, one realizes the essence and the coming down of all phenomena. Remember, bab is the word, the verb associated with rain. Bab. Like right now, if you're in Asheville, the rain is bupping. The rain is coming down. Rain is bupping. The fundamental nature, the shibab of all phenomena, is that happiness arises from what is virtuous in its nature, and suffering arises from what is non-virtuous in its nature. Through the vital point of that, emptiness arises as the elimination and accomplishment of cause and results. The elimination of cause and result is talking about the elimination of non-virtuous cause and therefore result, the accomplishment of virtuous cause and therefore result. The Lord Mila taught this to Gampopa as the farewell teaching, the last teaching that Milarepa gave Gampopa. He said, do not interrupt the virtuous dharma conduct, even though there is no hope for Buddhahood up above, and shun even the most subtle evil, even though there is no fear concerning the bad states of birth below. It is said that this was the last advice that Milarepa gave Gampopa. So Milarepa is saying, yes, you can practice to a point. You're so advanced in your practice that you no longer need to hope for Buddhahood. As well, you have no longer need to conduct yourself based on being afraid of suffering. Yeah. But even if you have reached that state, do not interrupt your acting in a virtuous way. And do not, and shun, always stay away from even the most subtle of evils. So that is the meaning, the real meaning of neither accepting nor rejecting, beyond good and evil, meaning beyond attachment to Buddhahood or aversion to the hell realms. Not because, there's no Buddhahood to attain and there's no hell realms to fall into. But you're no longer motivated by attachment or aversion, hate or love. There is a story to sort of illustrate this point from the Muslim tradition. Story of one of the Muslim saints. It's a woman saint. I forgot her name already. Trying to remember her name. But there was a Muslim saint, a woman, Rabia maybe, who is a Sufi as well. And it is said that she would instruct people almost like in the style of Mahasiddhas, almost in the style of our Mahasiddhas. So it said that one day she was running around the Kaaba, like the most sacred shrine on earth for all Muslims, right? Muslims pray 5 times a day. They all turn towards the Kaaba, no matter where they are in the world. So it said that one time, I think it was Arabia, she took a big torch, flaming torch, and a bucket of water.
Rabia.
Yeah, Arabia, yeah. Ran around the Kaaba. And so people are like, what are you doing, And she said, I'm going to burn down heaven and put out the fires of hell. And of course, it was very scandalous, to speak like this. And he said, people said, why? Are you crazy? She said, because people are approaching God out of the fear of hell and desire for heaven, and not out of love of God. So in order for people to come to God with true love, I need to burn up heaven and drown out the fires of hell. Yes, similar, similar idea. Of course, what they're pointing to may or may not be similar, but similar idea here, as in, do not interrupt the virtuous Dharma conduct, even though there's no more, you don't hope for Buddhahood above anymore. And shun even the most subtle evil, even though you have no more fear. So this is the meaning of beyond hope and fear, beyond attachment and aversion, beyond accepting and rejecting. Moreover, Milarepa said, since emptiness is more subtle than the many explanations you are able to make of emptiness in accordance with authoritative scripture and reasoning, it is difficult to understand emptiness and to develop confidence. So Milarepa says, yeah, there are scriptures you can quote and you can study and understand about emptiness, and you can use reasoning, but even those two cannot get to the real point of emptiness. And so it's difficult to understand emptiness and to develop confidence. Having great confidence in emptiness and then understanding that emptiness itself arises and as cause and result, you will automatically engage in efforts toward eliminating and accomplishing cause and effect, which is establishing virtue and abandoning evil. Since this great confidence in cause and result is the root of all dharmas, it is very important to be meticulous and make efforts towards the practice of abandoning evil and accomplishing virtue. So this is really important, this quote. Moreover, in the Samadhi Raja Sutra, it says, even though it is understood that in true reality there is no ripening of karma, virtuous and non-virtuous activity never goes to waste. Dwelling in peace is the vehicle of particular Buddhists, and Shravakas followed the sound of liberation. The last two lines of this quote, Sobish explains a little bit, but for our purposes, you know, not so relevant. Yeah, more to the point is the first two lines. Moreover, Lord Pamadrupa said, simply mouthing of the view will not help. Oh, the view. Yeah, you have heard me complaining about. I'm doing the opposite, you know, mouthing, not mouthing about the view. So here it says, simply mouthing of the view will not help. If you decisively pierce to the heart of the matter and abide in the state of the one taste, son, you will actualize all of cause and result. Talk about the view. We have no idea what the view is in the sense of view as realization. We can have a lot of theories. And yes, if some of these theories help, then we should rely on them. But how do we know whether they're helping or not helping? Helping in doing what? Helping in engaging in the 10 virtues, avoiding the 10 non-virtues. That we can see. Whether I instinctively resort to lying or harming or stealing, yeah, or frivolous talk, divisive talk, that you can see. Don't need any special instruction to see whether you're still habitually doing that or not. So you don't need to have all kinds of fancy theories. Your theory only need to be as good as it will help us to give up the 10 non-virtues. So don't get addicted to chasing fancier and fancier theories. Unless, you know, your karma in this life, you know, is to also learn how to more effectively teach others, then knowing more theories, you know, can be helpful. His Holiness Drigong Kyabgon said, you know, he met one person years back in Ladakh. And this person is well known in Ladakh for knowing the medical system really well, Tibetan medical system, the formal system where you're trained as a doctor. And the root text of this system is called the Four Tantras. It's a medical text, but it's called the Four Tantras. It's not about Vajrayana, but it's a medical text called the Four Tantras, Yushi. And the 4 sections of this medical treatise. Big text. And this man has memorized the entire text, like this encyclopedia of Tibetan medicine. So, you know, he met His Holiness and they were discussing some of the, you know, interesting things in the Gyushi and And clearly this man was very learned. But His Holiness said, but this man, in the course of his conversation with His Holiness, he also said, but Your Holiness, when it actually comes to helping a sick person, many village doctors without this education do a way better job than me, than him, this great authority on the medical texts. He said, because there is a whole class of medical practitioners in traditional Ladakhi village. They know how to prescribe medicine, herbal medicine, and different lifestyle changes and all of that, but they don't have knowledge on the theory behind it. Oftentimes they learn from their father. But this doctor emphasized, he says, the reason why many of these village doctors can heal people way more effective than I can is because they are connected to the people. They know the people that they serve, that they heal. And His Holiness said, in other words, there is love and compassion among these village doctors. May not have all the knowledge, but because they're connected from the heart with the people. And then they don't even need to learn the Gyushi, the 4 tantras. They just learn by observing what their father did, and they're able to help. Same here, Simply mouthing of the view will not help. If you decisively pierce to the heart of the matter and abide in the state of the one taste, son, you will actualize all of cause and result. Finally, if one realizes emptiness, the realization of all dharmas as only cause and result is the natural or fundamental nature. She sambhab. She natural. Bab, the playing out, the unfolding, the coming down. Okay, good today. We're taking a break on Wednesday. I'm not able to have class on Wednesday, so we're off Wednesday. Yeah, I have to go help someone the next few days, and then we will continue on Friday. Thursday also, Lojong series is over, so now a lot of time for samsara. So please take good care of your samsaras, and Chanchu Semchu Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gyurche Ge Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Gong Ne Gong Du Bel War Shou